Hey friends, here at Hansel Minutes, we like to appreciate our sponsors. So I'm talking directly to JD from Raygun.com. JD, everyone's sprinkling AI on stuff. I feel like error resolution needs AI. Can you help?
Oh, I absolutely can help you with that. Yeah, Raygun now includes AI error resolution, which allows a developer to get a better understanding of what may be causing a fault. And I got to be honest, quite often I read those responses and, the reason for the fault is actually something quite basic and I've just forgotten about it. So having those little bit of prompts really saves me a lot of time. It's kind of like having the rubber duck debugging built right into the product.
I love it. Auto prompt with your chosen large language model. You get all that error context from your stack trace, from your environment, and your affected code. You can take a look at raygun.com for a 14-day free trial and use the code Hanselman for half-price monitoring for your first month. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Senior Product Manager Kaitlyn Jones, who works on Xbox accessibilities and the new Xbox Adaptive Joystick. How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you, Scott?
I am very well. I am a big fan of the Xbox Adaptive Controller. This is the kind of white slate. It's like a tablet, and it's got two giant black buttons on them. And when I had my shoulder surgery, and I couldn't play Xbox for a while, I used that controller. And I've actually set that controller up for multiple people where I've actually gone to their house, brought them the controller, set it up. Some people had, wheelchairs. Some people had maybe cerebral palsy. Everyone's different. So you set it up in different ways. And it's been a killer product. I mean, people love the adaptive controller, don't they?
They do. And I think what you just said really showcases the beauty of it, that, someone with more, extreme limited mobility can use it, but also just following a shoulder surgery and you're trying to protect that movement. It's great for that too.
Yeah, I have video of me on YouTube, like using my right foot and my left foot to like shoot, because my right arm was just, the whole thing was paralyzed for a while. So I just plugged it in and I got to use it. And it was like unlimited remapping. And if people haven't seen this, they really got to go check out Xbox Adaptive Controller, because it's not a controller. This is the part that I think is so funny. You call it the Xbox Adaptive Controller. It's a controller construction kit. And yeah. I think when I started thinking about it like that, for me, that clicked more than like, what are these two giant black buttons for? Like, how is this adaptive?
Yeah, totally. I do love that we call it a controller, so people know like it'll work wherever an Xbox controller works. It's seen as a controller by games, but I think of it kind of like a hub. Like it's a hub, you can plug in what you need, and it sends those inputs back to your console or your PC.
So when you plug it in, it shows up as a HID, right? A hardware input device. You don't have to. There's no drivers for the thing. You just plug it in and your machine goes, it's an Xbox controller. But there's a whole Xbox accessories app on Xbox. So the Xbox knows that it's special. And the Xbox then allows you to do unlimited customization, right?
Yeah, and it'll work on the PC version of the accessories app too. And one of my favorite things is that the adaptive controller will actually store your remap profiles on the device itself. You can store up to 3 and save them right onto the physical hardware. So you can then bring that to another console or your friend's house, and your remappings are already saved onto the device.
Oh, that's cool. See, that's a small thing, but a huge thing, right? Like you could have the program managers, have stored that in the cloud somewhere. But by storing it in firmware on the device itself means that it really is yours, and you carry it to your friend's house and you plug it in and you just keep doing your thing.
Exactly.
See, this is the thing that I appreciate. And I really like, I wish Microsoft hardware, and by that I mean like all up mice, keyboard, and, webcams was still really a thing, because I think Microsoft does a really good job at this. And the little joyful notes of like the adaptive controller and the work that happens in the Xbox controller team is so clever. Like, for example, let me talk about the top row. Tell me about the adaptive controller's top row, because it looks like a bunch of headphone jacks.
Yeah, that is pretty much what they are. But there's 19 3.5 millimeter ports, and they have labels across all of them. So every button that you'd find on a standard controller, A, B, X, Y, triggers, bumpers, they're all externalized to these ports. So you can just take whatever switch button you want, plug it into any of them, and by default, it'll be mapped to what's labeled on it, but then you can also change it. My favorite thing is that there's actually 2 ports that are kind of wild card ports, we call them, and they're not mapped to anything. They're just called X1 and X2. And this way, you're not taking away another button. If you remap one that's already in place on a default assignment, you can remap them to whatever you want. And they're more than just digital and analog. You can actually connect like a 10K potentiometer joystick into those X1 and X2 ports and use them for joystick movement too.
So the thing about headphone jacks, these 3.5 millimeter headphone jacks, is that they are really just 2 wires disguised as a headphone, right? So if you're a mechanical engineer type person, you can go and buy, this is a little advanced, but you could go and buy a headphone jack and an Arduino or a widget or whatever button or thing you can imagine 3D print and wire up to. As long as your 2 wires terminate in this end, you could make your own button. You could make your own anything as long as it can effectively turn 2 wires into a headphone jack and tell the adaptive controller to do a thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen people make really cool buttons too. Like we have folks who work with kids with autism who might have sensory processing disorder, and the clickiness or sound of buttons is just not something that they enjoy. So they've made pillow buttons where you just squeeze the pillow and that's what connects the 2 wires and sends it as a button press, and just all different textures and stuff like that. It's been really cool to see.
That is so cool. Okay, so then fast forward a couple of years. Everyone loves the Xbox Adaptive Controller. It exists. You can buy it. It's really very well priced. It's not expensive. I think it's actually cheaper than a regular controller. And you can go and do whatever you want to with it. And now the Xbox Adaptive Joystick is coming early next year. And this is another kind of Xbox Adaptive Controller, or it's a companion to the existing Adaptive Hub?
It is more of a companion to the existing Adaptive Hub. It's got a thumbstick and 6 buttons on it. So using just that joystick alone, you might need a few more buttons if you're playing a more intense game that has more inputs than 6 buttons. But I think the beauty of it too is that it'll work with the adaptive controller. It's a fantastic companion for it. But if you don't have an adaptive controller or don't need one, you will be able to connect the adaptive joystick directly to your PC or console and use that alone, or use it with Xbox Controller Assist, which is formerly our Xbox Copilot feature, and use it with another standard controller, or kind of combinations of different controllers too.
Yeah, that Copilot Assist thing, that was a word before Copilot got taken over by the AI people, was this idea that you can virtually split a controller in half and I'll do the head and you do the body. At least that's what I did when my kids and I were playing Halo and they couldn't get the left thumb and the right thumb to work together. Okay,
Yeah.
You run around and shoot and I'll move the head. So you can virtually split stuff up. This is a single thumbstick, right? So it's one of the 2 thumbsticks, and you could potentially buy 2, I suppose, right?
Yep.
And use them in left hand and right hand, kind of like a Meta Quest.
Yeah, exactly. If you wanted to.
And are they left-handed and right-handed, or is it just universally handed?
They're ambidextrous, and that was actually something that was really important to us when we were kind of deciding on the form factor and the design of it, was making sure that it wasn't specific to one hand or the other, and cater to more broader needs.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the website, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes, and I really think it's important that people look at this. Right at the top, you see the joystick, and it's got a pretty typical looking Xbox thumbstick, and it's got not buttons marked A, B, and X and Y, but it says 1, 2, 3, and 4 with an X in front of it. I want to talk about that in a second. But there's a young lady who is got some limb differences, and she's got the controller kind of pushed up against her chin, and I'm looking at this ball that she's pushing, which is basically an extension on top of the thumbstick, and it looks very familiar. And I realize it's because I'm a 3D printing person. It has texture on it. That is not something that comes with the joystick. Have they 3D printed an extension joystick there?
Yes, it's actually another new program that we announced when we announced the joystick in August of this year. It's the Adaptive Toppers with Xbox Design Lab, where you can actually go the same place that you would design customized controller colors and that sort of thing in Design Lab. We now have a separate section that is Adaptive Toppers, so you can choose between the Adaptive Joystick, the Elite controller, or just a standard Series XS controller, and choose from, I think, 6 different topper shapes, adjust the height and the width of those toppers, and it'll give you a free 3D printable STL file that you can then take to a printer or send to a printing service if you don't have access to one, and really customize how you grip the thumbsticks on our controllers even more.
I thought this was really amazing, and I'll put a link to this as well. This is xboxdesignlab.xbox.com. These STL files, you can just bring them in and print them out. It takes literally 15 minutes to print these out. How are they clicking in, though? Because I noticed that it's not just adaptive toppers for the adaptive controller. In the picture here, I see an Elite controller that has an adaptive knob attached as well. Is it a magnet? Is it a screw? How does that thing attach?
Yeah, it differs. So for the standard, it's more of a claw that attaches to it. But for the Elite, in the same way that you can remove the entire thumbstick metal cap, you just take the full thumbstick off, and then this has that same attachment circumference, and you just pop that one on where your Elite thumbstick would have sat otherwise.
That's so cool. I wonder, did they think about that, or what came first, the adaptive idea, or just how did you all think? Oh, we could also adapt the Elite controllers too.
I think it just came naturally. Like, we wanted to make sure that if we were offering this sort of customization for one suite of controllers, that anyone who had a different controller like the Elite could do it too. But we also know that the Elite controller is really important for a lot of our players with disabilities. The paddles on the back are great. The customization is great. So if anything, making sure it was available for the Elite controller was even more important because we know how many players with disabilities use it.
Yeah. Now, people might be listening and say, well, that's great for the people who know how to design things and have industrial engineering degrees and have a 3D printer. But let me tell you, the tool that you're designing it in is actually interactive and you can see it visually. You don't have to go into like Fusion 360 with a calipers, and it takes care of it for you. So you can pick the topper, change the width, change the height. And if you don't have a 3D printer, you can just go to the library and your local library can print one of these out. And it's not hours, it's minutes to print these out and test them and try again. It's super cool. Hey friends, for the next couple of episodes, as I learn more about AI, I'm going to take a moment in the middle of the show and chat with Leendert van Doorn from Qualcomm. I thought that Qualcomm was putting special herbs and spices and making things in the silicon that are secret, but all the great work that you're doing is in open source software. How do you balance being an IP company and doing so much open source?
Oh, that's a great question. Open source is a necessity nowadays, right? If you look at all these new businesses that we're going in, XR, PC, auto, IoT, right? Open source is the name of the game there. And so we have to participate. That doesn't mean that we're giving up all our secrets, right? There is still a lot of secret sauce in how we implement things. But how you use it, right? How developers can use it, that all needs to be open. Because again, developers are the ones that make our platform valuable. So we want to have them, we want to give them every opportunity to use our platform and to enable for it.
Yeah. And y'all at Qualcomm are starting to show up in all of the spaces that developers are. I see you in GitHub issues. I see you in the Discords. They're out there, the engineers from Qualcomm, helping enable these new tools on your SoCs. It's so amazing.
Exactly. Participation is so important.
You can learn more about all the great stuff that's happening at Qualcomm at qualcomm.com/developers. The Xbox Adaptive Joystick looks like like I mentioned, the Quest. It looks like a Wii nunchuck. There's been things like this before. How is it more than that? How is it? What is it? What features does it have that make it beyond just a handheld thumbstick?
Yeah, I think as compared to the Wii nunchuck, it's got more buttons on it. It has those 4 face buttons on the front of it. I think the biggest difference, which is also one of my favorite aspects of the device, is it's got on the bottom of it a quarter 20 threaded insert. So you can take any kind of like standard tripod mount for cameras, things like that, and just twist it into the bottom and it will hold up the entire device for you. So that's when you could start doing things like the image you mentioned, using it with your chin because it's mounted up by your face, using it with your foot. So like first and foremost, it's a handheld device. It's a one-handed joystick sort of thing, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't limited to just hands. So through that mounting support, we're hoping to give folks more flexibility in how they're actually using this.
Yeah, that term quarter 20, 1/4 inch 20 describes the width and then the threading of that. And that standard is a standard for putting cameras on tripods.
Yeah.
But that's so cool that you're not creating a new standard. You're accepting that there's already a way to do this. So let's just use that.
Yeah, and that was the idea too with the headphone jacks on the adaptive controller. It's like, well, we already know people are using adaptive buttons that have this connection type. Let's not make a new connection type. Let's use what people already have.
So you mentioned that you can plug the adaptive joystick directly into your PC or your console, but you can also plug it into the Xbox Adaptive Controller. So this is an audio show, but we're juxtaposing the adaptive joystick with the adaptive controller. So if I wanted, I'm imagining I could have two of these, one in each hand, and then I could put the adaptive controller on the ground and I could use my feet. Like you have effectively unlimited flexibility.
Yeah, exactly.
The adaptive controller, that's the flat one with the two big black buttons, doesn't have thumbsticks. It doesn't have axis control. Does it always expect that you're going to do your left and right thumbstick with some add-on?
I think that's the more common use scenarios, that you'll have some sort of thumbstick that attaches to it. But the remapping is so robust on it. You can actually take 4 buttons and map them to left or right stick cardinal directions and basically do thumbstick movement through 4 buttons that are up, down, left, right. So that's an option too.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you can remap digital things to analog things. They don't necessarily have to be a thumbstick, or like you could just say up on this button or this button. Like you could move your head to the left and that could be a button and that would move the joystick left.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I want to back up a little bit because I want to understand how you get a job like this, because you weren't always a product manager at Microsoft, but you had an interesting job that is kind of in the same vein of helping people be successful as they move through life.
Yeah, I was an occupational therapist before coming over to Microsoft about 6 years ago. So I was very often working with my patients and my clients and was trying to bring adaptive gaming into their treatment sessions. I realized really early on that, playing a video game where I'm challenging them to do the same exercises and range of motion movements was much more engaging and fruitful for them than, asking them to do a puzzle or an arm bike or something like that. So I saw the power of healing for gaming. And then I guess along with that, I was working with my dad, who had a nonprofit where he was adapting video game controllers way before the adaptive controller came out for veterans with limb loss, spinal cord injuries, things like that. He was pretty much cracking open Xbox controllers and soldering out big buttons and joysticks and mouth controllers and things like that. He's made devices for quadruple amputees with no limbs, and now they're playing first-person shooters competitively. So I very much grew up with that in that space, and then going into the healthcare space. And it just kind of all came together. The weird backstory of how I actually got connected to Microsoft specifically is an engineer from Microsoft saw our nonprofit's Twitter page, and they saw that we were cracking open all of the Xbox controllers and wanted to know how they can help us do that work to scale, because obviously there's a lot more players with disabilities than what these small nonprofits who are hacking could support in the world. So they brought us out for some hackathons, and through that partnership and us and a few other organizations talking about our needs and how they could help scale this work, that is what eventually became the Xbox Adaptive Controller a few years later, through lots of awesome, talented groups and people internally at Microsoft pushing to get it out there. But just through those connections, being on campus, talking about how as an OT, I often have to hack and modify products off the shelf to make them work for my clients. It'd be really cool if you brought somebody with that hacking knowledge of what needs to be done into the development process, so we can kind of embed those thoughts and how to make products more inclusive during development, so they're already accessible off the shelf. And my OT friends and parents and caregivers at home aren't hot gluing and Velcroing and soldering to make the products more accessible once they're out.
Your OT friends, your occupational therapy friends.
Yes, sorry, occupational therapy friends.
So let me ask you this: what is your dad doing now? Is he changed his nonprofit and now it is based on the adaptive controller platform?
Yeah, pretty much. He does a lot of just creating joysticks with different grasps and handles and form factors that are compatible with the Xbox Adaptive Joystick to try to fill some of those gaps. Now that the actual adaptive joystick is out, I'm hoping that alleviates some of that need, because he's basically 3D printing in like my childhood bedroom that he turned into his office, and it's a small operation. So, but yeah, he's still at it. He's still supporting the community, and he has a small little shop page. And our business model is kind of the very, very tiny profit margin from civilians purchasing these peripherals for the adaptive controller goes towards funding the free hardware for any veteran who comes to us looking for this kind of stuff.
What is the domain or the name so we can add that to the show notes?
Yeah, it is warfighterengaged.org.
Warfighter Engaged, a 501c3 all volunteer veteran support organization that folks can check out at warfighterengaged.org. That is fantastic. So he says, though, that at the end of the year, he's not going to be designing and doing the custom buttons. Why is that?
Yeah, I think, it's been a long, great run over the last 5-6 years that the adaptive controller has been out. But again, like I mentioned earlier, he's very exhausting with all of the fabrication and trying to support the community. Yeah, and he has a day job, so he works all day, comes home and 3D prints and solders and does electronic stuff all night. So I think he's looking to take a break from the space for a little bit, and hoping that some of the more commercialized products like the adaptive joystick are going to fill a little bit more of that niche.
Yeah. Well, folks can check out Warfighter Engage, though, until the end of the year, because there's still stuff on the web store that plugs in. So you could buy the final last stock. He's created FPS joysticks, snap sticks, palm sticks, D-pads, different large and small button pads. It's really very diverse. This is all just imagined by he and you, these different adapters?
Yeah, mostly him. I won't take credit for his designs, but just, again, through working with folks with various disabilities over the past, I don't know, since 2012, so I guess 12 years now, realizing what folks need, what works, what doesn't work, and putting all of that into specific form factors.
Yeah, some of these are really, really interesting. Some of them are sold out, of course, but like there's some really interesting analog joysticks that look like flight sticks. And I can imagine how like he designed it, 3D printed it, and then now it can plug into an Xbox Adaptive Controller, and it's very comfortable to grip if your grip is different than typical grip. Some of these look like they mount to wheelchairs as well.
Yeah, they do. A lot of them have the same 1/4 20 size threaded insert on them for that purpose.
Where do you see the future of this stuff going? Like, is there an end game where it's done and you've made the adaptive joystick, you made the adaptive controller, and the team is like, okay, I think that's it, we're finished?
I don't think we'll ever be done. I think we're always learning, and especially just how much the overall premise of game accessibility has been growing really rapidly over the past 5, 6, 7 years. I think the more people whose hands we get these devices in, the more discoverability that there are these tools out there, the more we learn where maybe we fell short or could improve next time. So I would hope that at some point we've created everything that everyone needs, but I don't know when that'll happen or if it will. So no end in sight right now, but that's, I think, a positive thing.
Where do you personally see the hardware, software combining? Like there's tools like Cephable that used to be called Enabled Play, which are letting you do like gaze control. There's also, puffer tools, mouth-based tools, but being able to just make accessibility personal with just, like your face. Where would you see something like that fitting into the Xbox ecosystem?
I mean, I think it fits in perfectly to it would to the Xbox ecosystem right now. I think it's just a matter of how we try to get some of those softwares and supports more integrated directly into our platform. But like my hope is that any player who wants to use, especially a combination of something like Cephable, where I could use head tracking and movement, voice input, and maybe the adaptive controller for one or two buttons, can seamlessly do that. So I would love to see it brought in for sure.
Yeah, I really like the idea that it's like almost like Lego pieces. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, I mentioned at the very beginning how I thought when I had my mobility issue that I would just buy the controller and I would be done. But then I realized, it's a kit, and I would build it, and it's adaptive. Literally, I have to imagine what my idealized scenario would be. So maybe for you, the listener, it's a combination of like, okay, I'm gonna jump the character by using my eyebrows, and I'm going to use my voice to reload, and I'm going to use my foot to do this. It's completely, almost overwhelmingly customizable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course with the Cephable example, just for folks that may not be familiar, it's CEPHABLE. It shows up as a HID device as well. It's just an input device, so you can plug it in and it'll work on an Xbox or on a PC. It used to run on a Raspberry Pi, and now it's a little bit more fancy. It's worth checking out. And just for ethical reasons, just note that I'm an investor in Cephable, and I'm a big fan of Alex Dunn and the folks that work with that. It is free for individual use, so folks can check that out as well. I think it's going to be a really nice companion to the adaptive joystick. Do you know how much the adaptive joystick's gonna cost? Ballpark?
Yeah, it's going to be $29.99 US.
Like my face, like that seems very reasonable. Like, hang on a second, it's not $100. That's cool. Was that a goal as well to make it fit into price points?
Yes, that was probably one of the most important goals, is the price point, and knowing that some folks in this community don't always have the same level of disposable income to purchase these sort of devices, and they're already spending a lot of money on other medical and assistive devices. We didn't want to introduce that as a barrier for this device too.
That is super cool. And the Xbox Adaptive Controller, the hub, is $99, $100, still less than an Elite if you get the big fancy Elite. So then, for not too much, you can assemble your own thing. Have you seen a community build up around this? Like, that your dad is making these things, but is there like a Reddit community, or where would I go to learn more about some of the cool controls, add-ons, and 3D printed pieces that people are making?
Yeah, there's a lot of I would say kind of fragmented communities of just different groups of folks that are kind of grassroots creating these resources and websites. There is a Reddit community. I think it's like r/disabled gamers, r/adaptive gaming, sort of those keywords where folks are posting different ideas and setups that they've created. We do have some Xbox forums on the subject, as well as an Xbox Adaptive Controller user guide on our Xbox support pages, where we have a lot of information, but we also have some player spotlight videos where players just talk through these are the buttons I use, this is where I place them, and this is how I use it for this game, just to help other folks generate ideas for how they might set up their own setup, because as you mentioned before, it can be really overwhelming. But there's also a lot of other maker groups too. So there's Makers Making Change. They're based in Canada, but they have this really, really robust open source kind of platform where they have tons of joysticks and buttons that you can literally print yourself. All the instructions are right there. They tell you which inner electronics to buy. So there's certainly a lot of options out there.
Yeah. One of the ones I think is really cool that you all worked with Logitech on, it's a separate thing that's sold by Logitech. It's an adaptive gaming kit. And one of the things that I was surprised about is it's not just a bunch of buttons in a box. It actually has a board that's effectively Velcro. Like it's the soft side of Velcro, which means you can lay these things out however you want. So you don't necessarily have to have a construction, like the ability to go and build boards and stuff with wood. You can get this kit, adjust the angles and the way that these things plug in just with Velcro, which is super cool.
Yeah, we're super grateful that they have made that kit and continue to make it. Like, for context, before that kit, a lot of the assistive tech buttons were like $60 for a single button, and with theirs you get 12 and the boards for $100. It's amazing.
Yeah, you get buttons, you get foot pedals, you get three small buttons, 3 large buttons, variable triggers, and then 4 what are called light touch buttons, which I didn't even realize mattered. Like, to your point about people wanting to have, like a pillow that they could squeeze, but also you don't want every button to click and slap. It could just be a very, very tiny light touch, which is super helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are you hoping to do in the next couple of years yourself? Like, where do you see your adaptive journey going? Because if I understand correctly, you don't have any mobility challenges. Your dad doesn't have any mobility challenges. This has just been a passion for your whole family.
Yeah.
As long as you can remember.
Yeah. I mean, I love my role here at Microsoft. I definitely feel like the impact that you can have on product that can, be in the hands of thousands and thousands to millions of people is way larger than I think every individual patient I could have ever treated as an occupational therapist. So I hope to stay here, keep working with the hardware teams here. I think what's been really great is how things like the adaptive controller are also influencing our standard product lines. So making sure that all of our next generations of Xbox hardware, even if it's not a bespoke accessibility device, just has inclusive design and accessible features built into it as well. So I think those are some of the big things that we're looking for. Is just across the board, we are intentionally thinking about accessibility for all products.
Yeah. And it's also worth noting, as I get older and as I have my own mobility challenges, that it could be said all of us will be disabled at some point. It just depends on how long it's going to take.
Yep.
So like my dad has arthritis in his hands, and I've been trying to get him to play games, and he might play the controller for a few minutes and go, this is not for me. Mm-hmm. And we want to avoid that because we're all going to be in that situation at some point. No one should be able to should be excluded from playing.
Yeah, exactly. My dad's the same way. He jokes, he asks for what he calls geezer mode in games, which is just as I'm getting older, my reaction time isn't as quick and my eyesight isn't as good. So like I might not need an adaptive controller, but just the game mechanics are a little bit too much for me right now. But I still want to play all the games I've been playing for years. So
that is so true. Like I don't know if I would call it geezer mode, but I'm playing like Star Wars Outlaws right now. And I'm playing on story mode. You know what I mean? I'm on easy. Yep. I am not interested in being punished. Like I've already beaten Elden Ring twice. I get it. There's no, like get good is not, I mean, it's fine, but it's like, I just want to like vibe and run around on my jet speed or whatever. Can I just not be punished by this game? I don't have the time. So yes, I respect your dad's goal for geezer mode. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kaitlyn Jones, for chatting with us today.
Yeah, thank you. This was awesome.
You can check out the Xbox Adaptive Joystick and Xbox Adaptive Controllers at xbox.com. And this has been another episode of Hansel Minutes. We'll see you again next week.